Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Horse Geeks podcast, where we look at horses and riding from the inside out. I'm Kirsten Nelsen, professional horse trainer, and with me once again, my compatriot, Deb Romero, certified Alexander Technique instructor. So today's topic is about the process of change, which is a little bit of a carryover from the last podcast, like finding that sense of safety within ourselves. And humans hate change. We all hate change. It's a big deal. And I thought,
Yep.
what you've learned in your work and what I've learned in my work about coping with change, I think might be useful. It just for people at large right now, there's a lot of change going on in our lives and in society. I think, 2020 and the pandemic was such an upheaval for everybody. We're still finding ourselves in this constant flux of change.
Yeah, and I
And
think that I think the 2020 thing brought about, we sometimes don't realize we have other options.
yes,
We get stuck in the ABCs of it all, and
yeah.
we don't realize, oh, well, that might work.
Well,
We're
and
looking at something
especially
else.
like we talked about last time, if we're in survival mode, if we're
Mm,
dominant in our fight flight nervous system, we're not recognizing opportunities. We're not able, unless we feel authentically safe from the inside out and take time to calm that nervous system down on purpose, maybe at least once a day,
yeah.
then then we literally don't see alternatives. We
No,
don't,
because it's kind of like kids can't learn in survival mode. Nobody can learn
yeah,
or be open to anything. It even goes to muscular activity. We've talked about if your muscle is tense and contracted, you have no proprioception or ability to make change.
right.
It
And
even
that's
goes
just
down to the muscular level.
it's a physiological
Yeah.
reality of our bodies. There's no getting away from it. So we may as well sort of learn to manage it. And so today's topic, the process of change, is kind of a consistent thing I think we've both seen in our work. Because I would say if I could put the main difference between a horse and a human into like one sentence, horses are highly adaptable. Humans are not very adaptable. Like, and therein lies the crux of much frustration and tension and struggle for horses and riders.
Right.
Like, horses adapt to change way faster than humans do. And
Mm.
we really resist change.
Hmm.
So the three stages of going through, especially an internal change, like something that really alters our coordination or is a massive influence in our life. Like they say, moving,
Hmm.
divorce, death, there's these biggies that everybody encounters in their lifetime that are massive changes. And so I found it's really helpful to give people a little bit of a foreshadowing of what's going to happen in the nervous system anytime we're presented with a challenge or an opportunity to change. And the first stage I see is resistance. So, resistance to what is not normal, what is different, right? Then the second stage is I call it confusion or disorientation.
Hmm.
And then the third stage is integration. And integration is a weird phase because, in a sense, as we've gone through the resistance and the confusion, by the time we get to integration, sometimes we don't even realize the huge change that we've integrated.
Yeah.
Like we almost kind of forget we were never this way before because our nervous system works so quickly. And once
Hmm.
it's integrated, it's now the new normal. So we almost can't remember how we were before.
Yeah.
And I know, like me, you grab your smartphone all the time to actually give people
Yeah.
physical, like visual feedback of
Yeah.
what's been happening because our internal experience, once we've integrated it, we almost can't remember what was happening before. We've integrated the change so thoroughly.
I agree with that. As an Alexander teacher, trying to give value and present to the person the way they are posturing is very hard for me to go there, to do bad posture, if you want to call it that. Um, so that's when I usually whip out my phone and start taking pictures because people don't believe that that's where they are.
Yeah, that's the power of the human brain
Yeah.
is to understand that we normalize everything. We
Hmm.
normalize anything, right?
Hmm.
So our human brain, especially like as we're sort of growing from toddler phase to teenage years, we're integrating a normal pattern of movement. We're integrating a normal lifestyle, so to speak, based on where we grew up. But that doesn't mean it's the only normal available.
Exactly.
Yes.
And we create that. I compare it to like hardware and software. We're not updating our software. We're,
Oh, so our nervous system is the hardware,
yeah,
but our sense of normal is the software.
yeah. And we think, and I hear language when people are making change. I don't know about you, but I hear certain language like, well, first you get the what? No, that's
That
not
can't
what I look
be.
like. That can't be.
Yeah.
And then they move past that and the language starts to be, is this it? Is this right?
Yes.
So it's interesting how the updating of our software, people just don't think because it's such a rote thing. Our daily activities become so rote, we don't ever question how we are doing them.
Right. No, and when it comes to helping riders improve their balance and take their riding to the next level, we have two big hurdles. One is human instinct, right? We all have that. And the other one is the neural pathway that most experienced riders have already developed, the neural pathway called riding, quote unquote,
Mm.
which is like a super highway in our nervous system. We've practiced it, we've worked at developing it. But in order to change and improve riding, it's very hard to do because the brain has normalized
Hmm.
this specific coordination in the nervous system called riding. So
Yeah,
it's
I
hard to
remember when
jump
you
out of that.
Yeah, I remember when you first saw me because being a hunter jumper rider forever, you said that I was one of your most difficult students because I have so many bad habits.
Well, no, it's not the bad habits. What what I typically see is anybody who has had a lot of training. Like you were a show rider, you rode from the time you were young, and whatever habit you had that I could observe that we could improve, that habit is deeply ingrained.
Mhm.
And so any rider who either rides even semi-professionally, you ride a bunch of different horses, or we've had years of riding, like years and years of riding instruction. And a lot of traditional training, like we've sort of talked about on this podcast, is actually kind of feeding the human instinct to
Mm,
grip and to brace and to control.
try harder.
Yeah, so rather than moving beyond instinct, a lot of our trained neural pathways with traditional training has actually just strengthened the instinct of the human.
Mhm.
So making a change with an experienced rider is what I call difficult.
Yes.
It's not that the patterns are so severely dysfunctional that it's like terrifying. It's just that the neural pathway is so strong that
Mhm.
you can see it whether they're on a horse or on the ground. So even
Right.
before you got on the horse, I could look at how you move and go hunter rider.
Yeah.
It
And
just
and and that's why I tell riders we can do a lot of work off the horse because your habits are everywhere. They're not just when you just amplify them when you get on the horse.
yeah, or in your work with riders, what I really liked and learned from with what you were doing was on the ground putting reins in a rider's hands
Mhm.
because that's an instant trigger to the neural pathway,
Huge trigger.
right? So you were able to sort of break it down and like once we get on the horse and we're taking up the reins, putting our feet in the stirrups, that's where our neural pathway is sort of running with the
Mhm.
strongest flow,
Mhm.
right? So I really loved how you worked with riders playing with chairs instead of a saddle, or you have that really cool horse stand, I think you
Oh.
call it, which is just a static stand. But as soon as riders' feet were off the ground and they were
Mhm.
straddling the horse stand, that neural pathway instantly kicked in.
Yeah.
Even on a horse stand, as soon as it
Right.
sort of simulated straddling something and having our feet off the ground, you could really work with the rider neural pathway in that setting. And then
Mhm.
putting reins in their hands or putting stirrups on the horse stand. Like each one of those elements
Right.
is a trigger that activates that neural pathway of our whatever our trained riding habit is. So to facilitate those changes, it really did help to work with people off the horse
Yeah.
because the actual movement of the horse is also a massive trigger.
Huge. And if we haven't achieved some type of quality of balance on the ground, it's going to be even harder once we get the physics of the horse moving underneath us.
Yeah. What I also find very consistent in the process of change is that riding a horse is way more dynamic than we think it is. In other words, when
Mhm.
the rider changes their balance, it directly influences the horse's ability to find their balance.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we don't put enough influence on the dynamics of the rider and how it affects the horse.
Yeah, because really, if we break it down to physics, it's our weight and mass influencing the center of mass on the horse. We straddle the center of mass. And so, excuse me, like we've talked about how we coordinate our axial skeleton, how stable or unstable we are in our center of mass is going to directly influence the forces of motion that are generated by the horse.
Mhm.
And physics, whether you like it or not, happening all the time,
All the time.
all the time. Yeah. So this process of change, like the first step that I call resistance,
Mhm.
that's everybody's reaction to
What's
change.
that face they look like, "What?"
Oh yeah, you can see it in the
You can
face or the
see it in their
body.
faces, like, "You gotta be kidding me."
Yeah. Or this was always, I knew I was affecting the first layer of change when the rider would look at me and sort of ask for my credentials.
Oh,
Who have I ridden with? What level have I shown at? What do you know? And basically, what they're kind of verbalizing is this feels so bizarre and unnatural. How do I know I can trust you?
right.
That's really what they're
And
asking.
the central nervous system in the brain is sending warning lights and
Yeah.
flashing lights like, "You gotta be kidding me."
Yeah. Yeah. And that was very difficult for me as a teacher for many years and to not take it personally where I was like, oh,
Right.
everybody goes through this. So that first initial reaction of resistance is now actually what tells me, I got in there. I
Right.
actually affected a change on a deep level because now I'm getting a little bit of resistance.
Hmm. Yeah.
And how do you recognize that in your work? Is it kind of the same where people
Yeah,
start questioning
it's
the
the questioning,
methodology?
the look, and I think that's your next step, the confusion, the questioning. That
Yeah,
can't be right. My body doesn't do it that way.
yeah. And at least now I know to tell people up front what to expect.
Yeah, I tell them it's going to be messy.
And I tell them, I go, look at the first sign of real change is that your brain is going to scream,
Hmm.
don't do this. This is wrong. This is
Yeah,
bad. This is
it's just
horrible.
messy.
Yeah. And even though I tell people that up front, it's a bit of a shock to the system to then
Hmm.
experience those feelings. And then I kind of get to remind them, nope, this is what change feels like. The first blush of
Yeah.
change, we don't like it. We resist it.
I
And
remember in starting Alexander School, and as you know, I'm was very type A, Jack Russell personality, and every day I'd go into the classroom and I'm like, "What's the plan? What's the plan?" And the teachers, "Oh, there's no plan." What do you mean there's no plan? Can't function without a plan.
where's the syllabus? What do I do?
Yeah, that's where's it written down? Oh no, we're just gonna wing it. Oh my God.
Yeah, and I remember you telling me because the Alexander Technique school to become certified is a 3-year process.
It's 3 years of training, yeah, with a student teacher ratio of 8 to 1. So it's pretty intense.
It's very intense.
Hmm.
And I remember you telling me year one basically is working on yourself.
Yeah,
And your
yeah.
reaction to those changes was, I'm going to curl up in the corner
I
with my
did,
blankie.
I did sometimes. I'm like, don't touch me. Just leave me alone. I'm gonna go in the corner. Just leave me be.
Yeah, I'm here. I can check the box, but
But that's it.
that's it.
I can't do any more adapting today.
Yeah. And it's like now we can look back and it's funny, but at the
Hmm.
time it's not funny. It's
It's
like
not funny.
our brain is screaming, we're overwhelmed. This can't be. And that's exactly where sometimes I watch a lot of people go, that's too hard. It's too uncomfortable. It's too much. I don't want to do this. And I find it
Mhm.
unfortunate because the change is available to us. But if we're going to change on a substantial level, especially regarding like our physical habits, our
Mm.
physical function is just, it really is just a habit in our nervous system.
Yeah.
But when we finally are sort of confronted or we bring that habit from unconscious to conscious awareness, our brain has a frickin' meltdown.
Yep.
It's like, oh no, you don't. All of our survival things kind of kick in. And I find that's the place I have to be the most gentle with
Mhm.
myself or with a student or with a horse. I
That's a
go,
good point.
because horses, the first sign of deep change is actually sort of a bounce between fight and flight. Like
Yeah, yep,
they're
I
gonna
see that.
explore all avenues of escape before they go, maybe it's okay.
And it's interesting how just like people, we all process that differently. There
Yeah.
is, yeah. I mean, my big mare, I know when I'm pushing the envelope, and it could be in a good way, that she'll start to blow and snort.
Yeah.
And I have to kind of pause and go, okay, well, could we push it further? Are we done today?
Or are we good right here?
Are we good right here?
Are
Is
we
this a,
good right
oh,
here? Yeah.
so you
And in
kind of
that,
have to watch that as a teacher. Like where can you go with it?
exactly. And be really respectful of ourselves internally or
Mhm.
of another who's going through that struggle that we all know. None of us get
Yes.
out of this process of change any differently than anybody else. So it gives me a lot of empathy. And what I found was I go, okay, let's just visit the new.
Mhm.
Your brain is going to hate it. But instead of saying right, wrong,
Mhm.
normal, and weird, or good and bad, we're just going to call it new and old, the old familiar and this new deal. And so we're just going to play. We're going to tell our brains to just stand by for a second. We're going to explore something new, and it's okay if we don't like it.
Mhm.
We're just going to explore it. And so just a few minutes of trying out something new in our coordination, our riding, or with our horses, and then retreat back to where the brain is happy. And the brain goes, oh. And
Mhm.
again, another super predictable part of this process of change is I'll, I now purposefully say, look, this is normal. We're not going to fight the brain because ultimately the brain will keep throwing default back in and
Mhm.
in unconscious ways. So I go, okay, we're going to explore the new, then we're going to retreat back to the old. We're just going to call it new and old. So we go to the new, hate it, go back to the old, love it. I go, okay, back to the new, hate it, back to the old, love it. But as we keep going back and forth and sort of allowing new information to arrive.
Mhm.
So in the new, is there anything you notice that's either different in a good way or some bit of information bubbling up from your subconscious, right? And I go, the body intelligence has a better sense of balance than the brain.
Exactly.
So when I'm working with the balance of a rider, I go, the body will bubble up little bits of information and say, hey, maybe this isn't so bad. And then,
Yeah.
and then what I see that sometimes I have to film for people is as we go back and forth between the new and the old, that the rider never fully goes back to the full version of the old.
Mhm.
Like as soon as the body experiences a little bit better organization, it's like the brain thinks you're going back to the old, but it's never as extreme as where the rider started. I find that fascinating
I do, and
that we
it's
all do
so
that.
intuitive. I mean, you can just see it evolving in the
Yeah.
human, just like you can kind of see it evolve in the horse. There's no specific place or words, but you and I have both heard all the different vocabulary that come out of people when the central nervous system gets really happy.
Yeah. And the words are always similar. They're
Yes.
unique to each person, but sort of
Mhm.
similar, like smooth, flowing, comfortable,
Mhm.
gentle, quiet,
Easy.
easy, liberated,
Mhm.
controlled. Like all of these different words I've heard from
Mhm.
people describe this new sense of balance eventually.
Right.
But if I don't respect this process of change that our brain and nervous system and body have to go through, it doesn't work.
Oh,
Nothing
I
sticks.
agree. People, and I'm sure horses, but people just shut down.
Horses too. You
Yeah.
you can't force a change in coordination. It's like this process is so key, knowing that whether it's the horse or the rider, I'm going to be met with resistance.
Mhm.
We're going to make a tiny change that doesn't feel dangerous or unsafe.
Right.
And then we're going to go back and forth between the new and the old and the new and the old. And then I tell people, the more often we go back and forth, just a few minutes back and forth in each use, you're going to start to feel confused, maybe even disoriented. You're no longer going to be quite as happy in the old, and you're not yet happy in the new.
I can totally relate to that because going back to Alexander School in your first year of having total evolution of your own body. Two of us, another athlete, a soccer player, and we could not ride. I couldn't ride because I would get on and I'd be like, I'm so confused.
I don't. Yes.
My old habit wants to come in, but my new habit says, no, 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 no. And then it would just be, oh, forget it. I'm just not going to ride.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I've seen it with even like walking. All of a sudden, the brain goes, I don't know how to walk anymore.
Right.
I don't know how to ride anymore. I don't know. And it's a little of a disorienting
Yes, it
place.
is.
And even with horses, like I'll see the horse start tripping a bit or getting fumbly footed, which is why I'll
Right.
do a lot of this sort of nervous system transition at the walk because I go, they will stumble. They will not know where their feet go.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you're at trot or canter, that can be a little risky, but altering that internal coordination, which is directed by our nervous system, is a big effing deal.
Yeah.
It is not like a tiny thing. And our
And
brains
yeah.
hate the change at first. Then we feel disoriented and confused. And then the more like during that confusion period, that confusion phase, again, I just continue with the back and forth. Like, and for you, you did this huge dramatic change through your entire nervous system, coordinating your body, doing everything, sitting, standing, walking, riding, everything. It's an intense study in the Alexander Technique School. And what I'm doing with riders is a micro version of that. So, like building up change in layers, because, like you're describing, it's not for the faint of heart to go through what you went through. It's kind of like life has to slow down.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and I remember one teacher saying, when you leave school every day, just leave it behind,
mhm,
because otherwise it becomes monopolizing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that same process you're describing over years, I see happen in usually between 10 minutes and 30 minutes of a
Hmm.
ride. Like I go, that to me is just wicked fast.
It is.
It actually, like a lot of riders in 10 to 15 minutes is kind of the average, sometimes as long as 30 minutes, mostly with well-trained riders. They're the ones that take the longest. And I go,
I can, that makes sense to me.
and it's not because they're more dysfunctional, it's because the neural pathway is that much stronger.
It is.
And
Yeah.
beginner riders sometimes under the 10-minute mark,
Right.
right?
They don't have the layers
Yeah, they don't have the layers to peel back
to
and
peel back.
they
Yeah.
don't have sort of the strength of a super conditioned habit.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we talk about muscle memory, but that's, it's like the muscle memory is the neural pathway. It's the same thing. And so with super experienced riders, they're more in the 30-minute category to make a change where they're listening to their body like a beginner rider. So what you're describing, trying to get on your horse and just feeling confused. I don't know how to
Hmm.
ride anymore.
I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
A new way, a completely new way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you really had to trust your Alexander Technique instructors. You made this huge commitment to go through that process over 3 years.
Right.
But even after the first 6 months of your first year, I looked at you and I was like, what are you doing? You look amazing. Like the difference was so obvious to me knowing you before you went into the Alexander School.
Hmm.
And then still when I see you, I'm like, wow, that what a massive change in how you use your body, how you look, doing everything.
And I think that that's what makes it different, because as with all that training, it's a constant process. I'm always questioning my movement, always being curious. Is there another way I could do this?
Yeah. Yeah,
because there's no right or wrong. It's just evolution of the process.
I think that's what, as a professional rider or horse trainer, I'm doing is always looking for the path of least resistance. Is there a little bit more improvement?
Mm,
Is there a little bit better coordination we could do this with? So rather than thinking of it as like a static arrival point,
yes.
it's just this constant process. And so getting familiar with what that process experience feels like was
Yeah.
so huge.
I remember in Alexander School, I was working with, I think I was in my third year, one of the instructors, which is kind of overwhelming within itself, working with her getting in and out of a chair. And I had my hand on her low back, and I could feel her tense her low back to get out of the chair. And she looked at me and she said, "Did I just do that?" And I went, "I think so." And here's somebody with 20, 30 years experience as an Alexander instructor. So the habits they're ingrained so deeply.
And instinct. We're always
Yeah.
sort of fighting instinctual use of the body as well as our personal physical habits. It's
Yes.
two things. Yeah, and I think understanding that the change never stops, I found a great freedom in that. It's like you let
That's
go of perfection.
that right wrong
Hmm.
attitude. Yeah, I've pretty much let go of that.
Yeah,
It's
it's
just an
like a letting,
exploration and bringing back the curiosity, like
yeah,
little kids, or if you think about the toddlers, they're just so curious about their bodies and how to use them.
yes,
Yeah, bringing that back in as an adult is helpful.
it is helpful. And with the, when I'm working with a rider, and we've started to move into the phase of confusion, that's where I usually whip out my phone and take
Yeah,
video and pictures.
they don't
And
believe it.
well, it helps the brain digest the information. But what I find is they're already in that confused phase, starting to feel or experience the intelligence of the body.
Mhm,
That body is starting to bubble up more and more information that, hey, this is a more efficient or more comfortable or a safer use of my
mhm.
body. So the fear of it, like a rider in fear, that fear starts to sort of dissipate, or the ease starts to come in a little bit.
Right.
Then when I take pictures and go, here's the old, here's the new, I think that just helps the brain adjust to the new is not as bad as I think it is.
Yes. And we are such a lot of people are such visual learners that that extra tool
Hmm.
of actually physically seeing yourself
Oh, yeah.
is
The
huge.
invention of the smartphone was massive as a teaching tool. Massive. Yeah. Yeah. And then the third phase I want to touch on a bit, the integration.
Mhm,
And the most interesting thing I find about this point of integration is all of a sudden the writer hates the old and suddenly is consciously aware of all of the struggles that were involved in the old use and doesn't want to be there at all and wants to be in the new.
mhm,
And this fascinating little tiny piece of almost not being able to remember the old. Like
mhm,
that integration is so fast that
mhm.
we almost feel like we haven't changed at all.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how powerful the nervous system is to do that again in 10 to 30 minutes.
And it's kind of confusing because we feel we're not adaptable, but we're very adaptable. If you think of when you have a trauma, an injury, you're adapting right away to a new way to move for survival.
Yes. And
So
even though
the
we,
adaptability is there. I think we just get stuck in the thinking that it's not.
that's kind of what I was going to say. It's not that we
Yeah.
could actually separate our brain from our body. But I think we have a tendency to try to function that way,
Yeah, I do
where
too.
our body is always operating at this either autonomic level or subconscious level. And we have to bring it up to a conscious level in order to make changes.
That's what the Alexander work's all about, is bringing the subconscious to the surface and
Yeah.
renegotiate.
Yeah. And I know that I've brought a deep unconscious habit to the surface the second I get met with resistance.
Yes.
I go,
That
oh,
face, that look, that what?
we nailed it.
Got it.
We nailed it. And the rider is frowning and I'm smiling and I go, we're there. And they're like, this feels
Yay.
horrible. We can't be there. This is crazy bad. And I'm like, no, we're there. And then the back and forth, and I actually kind of call it rebooting the nervous system
I like
because
that. Yeah.
that's a little bit what it's like rebooting your computer or and in order to do a software install, you have to reboot the computer. I go, we're not all that different when it comes to our nervous system.
Exactly.
So I kind of call that process rebooting and I go, let me know. And usually I can see it in how they're going back and forth or the body language or the facial expression.
Hmm.
You can kind of tell when somebody's entering that phase of confusion and
Hmm.
disorientation. And then I get out the phone, take some pictures, and we move on.
And that's our happy place as teachers.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And then, like, something that people will say all the time as riders when they get to the integration phase is things like, how did I not know this before? Because it feels
Why
so,
wasn't I taught this before? I,
yeah.
I hear
Or
that a lot.
there's almost a sense like it feels so right through our
Hmm.
body that we don't understand how we ever missed it.
Yeah.
And that's where the body and mind are reintegrating. And
Hmm.
that's now the brain and the body are going to seek that new feeling, that new coordination. And we
Hmm.
still have to practice it because the
Oh,
default
yeah.
setting in our body, but the difference is we're now consciously aware of the old habit and we want
Hmm.
to move in, like the body and the mind wants to move into this new place. And every time we improve our mechanical coordination, our balance, the words come up: ease, smooth, gliding, flowing. Like there's an efficiency of motion is really the technical term of better coordination. But we sense that efficiency of motion with less muscle tension, less effort, less
Hmm.
strain, less struggle, more sort of go with the flow, but not feeling at the mercy of the flow.
Right.
You
And the
know,
central nervous system recognizes it right away.
right away.
Right away.
It is hardwired. It's the hardware that you're
Hmm.
talking about. Yeah. And when we get the right software program running on the hardware program that sort of
Hmm.
matches, everything works, everything operates smoothly, efficiently,
Yes. Yep.
seamlessly. And that's the thing we experience as we move towards better mechanical coordination. The sensation of it is consistently efficient, smooth, easy, less strain.
Hmm.
Even if our brains are still going, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah,
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 but
but, yeah, but what about, hey, this is so weird, right? And then I have to tell writers, I go, even though now you're forging a new neural pathway. So even though now you desire these changes, this neural pathway is like a single track trail compared to the superhighway that you have from years of
hmm.
riding. So I go, you just have to recognize when you're on the superhighway and redirect yourself back to that little single track path until you turn the single track path into the new superhighway. That's a lot of practice.
Yes.
That's a 10,000 time repetition per ride.
And it can be mentally fatiguing.
That's actually the other like number one
Hmm.
comment. I
Uh-huh.
get is I am mentally exhausted,
Yes.
even though physically this was easier.
Yes, because we're having to bring all that stuff from subconscious to conscious. And that's a lot of work for the brain to deal with.
Yeah, and it's a little bit like that fatigue when you're a full-time student. All
Yes.
that sort of learning and digesting and integrating information, even though you're sitting at a desk 9 hours a day, it's like you're exhausted from
Yes.
just thinking that much. And it's the same when we go to change our physical coordination. The amount of mental focus it takes is mentally fatiguing.
I like to compare that with the horse because I notice the more I'm paying attention and working on myself when I'm riding, the horse is kind of doing the same thing. Does that make sense? They're
Absolutely.
mentally, it's kind of like I was riding yesterday on my big mare and FedEx trucks going by. My husband's out hammering something and she wanted to be drawn away, but the more I focused on my balance and stillness, she was able to come back and
Yes.
focus on what we were doing
Yes.
instead of all the distractions.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's no way that, well, let's just take the horse. It's true for people too, but a horse can't be distracted and working in their best balance and coordination at the same time. It's a
Yeah,
one or the other kind of deal, even though they can jump back and forth wicked fast. And people who say, I can't get my horse's attention, I go, then focus more on the details of yourself or the horse's balance. Because as
right.
soon as we really get into the same process with our horses. The first layer is resistance. That's where we
Mhm.
have to be patient and keep asking the question. The second layer is confusion for the horse,
Right,
and that's where they might stumble or they have to mentally focus a lot. And I know I'm in that phase with a horse because as a rider, both of the horse's ears are tuned to me.
right.
And without any special technique or training or desensitization, the horse just starts to shut out the rest of
All
the
of the
world.
noise.
Yeah.
And we do too. I mean,
Hmm.
we can't be thinking about, I've only got an hour. We can't be making our grocery list, all the
Yes.
all of
Yeah.
those things. And I'm wondering, I know for me, that's what attracts me to riding is I have to tune all that other stuff out.
Yes.
And I like that's like a happy place, a quiet place.
It's a nice retreat part of the day.
Mhm.
Kind of like we
Yes.
talked about in the last podcast, finding that quiet time, shutting out
Mhm.
the noise of the world and just being able to focus internally. That was part of my attraction to riding
Yeah, it's
was
mine.
the world stops and I get to just sort of shut everything out, be with my horse, and kind of like having coffee with a good friend. It's like I'm just going to
Right.
talk to my horse for an hour and have this
Yeah.
back and forth exchange, and everything else can just be on pause for an hour
Yeah.
while I'm doing that.
That's the beauty of having your horses at your house. If I'm in having a bad day, just go to the barn.
Yeah, even if they're not at your house, it's like,
Oh, that's
ah,
true.
there's your horse.
There's the
Yeah.
horse.
Yes. Yeah, and even if we're not riding, I think
Mm-hmm.
and way long ago, I did an episode on the heart math.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember that.
and there is this sort of heart frequency that horses have. We can deplete it in horses if we're not sort of refilling ourselves and showing up with our own calm heart energy. But horses are the one animal that can actually affect the human heart frequency. I found that
I
really
believe that
interesting. And that was a
totally.
research paper done by the Heart Math Institute. I think they have a website, but I
Yeah,
want to do another episode on the heart math because it was pretty interesting
that
and
is
how,
interesting. I'd like more.
and also that there's more ascending neural pathways from the heart to the brain than there are descending neural pathways from the brain to the heart.
Hmm.
So that quiet time with our horses can really be good for our hearts and good for our
Yes.
well-being. And I think when we're going through this process of change with our horse, it's sort of like being in the trenches together. We get a
Yeah.
lot more patient when we go through this experience or this process of change ourselves. We suddenly get a lot more patient with our horse's process of change.
I have a better understanding
Yeah.
because I'm processing so much for myself that the horse has to be given that same amount of space
Hmm. It's
to
not a timed
process.
event.
It's not a timed event. Good point.
No. And each little change can happen within that 10 to 30-minute window. But what I'm doing every ride is kind of stacking or layering one little change on top of the next little change. So I go, what feels like crazy, awful, horrible when I started, I go, now it's the exact same crazy, stupid, horrible, but I just got used to it.
Right.
It's just not that bad because you know what to expect. And you're like, oh, this is that part.
This is that
Okay,
ugly part, the messy part.
this is that messy part. This
That's
is
what I
that
call the
part.
messy. It's going to be messy for a while. Don't worry about it.
And my brain's going to tell me, don't go there.
Mhm.
And so I go,
Not
okay,
going to believe you.
let me go back and forth. I won't go there and stay there. I hear you. But let me go back and forth until maybe we could find something new.
Something in between for a while. And it
Yeah.
is layers. I mean, you keep evolving new layers of awareness of your use. It
And
never
better
stops.
coordination.
Yeah, it never
Absolutely.
stops.
It,
It's available to you if you want to access it.
absolutely. And even like working with you sometimes when I'm the rider, you'll say one thing and it'll feel like the tiniest little change. Like I just rearranged something in my body a centimeter, or I made a change that was so subtle that I could barely be aware of it. And
Hmm.
then my horse is like sailing off in better movement. And I'm going, holy crap. Like the more we get into the detail of it,
Hmm.
the bigger the difference it
Yeah,
makes rather than smaller changes making a smaller difference. So a small change in the beginning feels huge, but it's
yeah, it
only the
does.
start of change. And then as you're progressing, the more you progress, the tinier the change, the bigger the difference. But you're not that aware of the change. It doesn't feel like a big deal to you, but it's a huge deal to the horse and how they
Right.
can balance and move. So it's so paradoxical.
It
Like
is.
I go
We're so
crazy.
geeky.
I know. But I think it has helped a lot of riders. And I think it's helped me in life too. When I go, the world is crazy today. I go, okay, how can I go through this process of change? Or my business changes, or my life changes, or
Right.
when I moved, right? And made a big couple hundred miles relocation or a new
No
job
kidding.
or a new
It's
client. It's like you just start to get better and better at recognizing, okay, stage one, not going to like it.
going to be uncomfortable and messy.
Brain's going to object.
Hmm.
We're not going to be too happy. We need to do some back and forth until we feel confused about what we like and what we don't
We
like.
don't. Where am I?
Where am I? Do I not like it? I'm not sure. And then keep going. And if we keep going, we're going to land on the other side of a new sensation of our bodies that's slightly better. And we wonder, have we always been doing this? Did we really change? It does feel better, right?
Hmm.
And even though we might not recognize that at first, our old habit will come up.
Oh,
But all of
yes.
a sudden, we're going to notice our old habit.
Yeah, it smacks you in the face.
Yeah, it gives you a quick slap across the face.
Wow.
Wacko. And then you go, oh, there it is. Okay,
Hello.
let me
I know you.
redirect. Let me
Yep.
redirect into the new.
Redirect.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a toddler, just redirect.
Yes. Yes. Or like they say, if you're going through hell, don't stop. Keep going.
Just keep going, go through
Go right through it.
it.
Yeah, because we do all go through, without exception, horses, humans, anybody with a vertebra and a nervous system kind of meets change with resistance. Horses way less so than humans. Humans the most resistance,
Mhm.
then confusion, and then coming out the other side into a new habit that feels better,
A new
feels more
integration.
efficient.
Hmm.
Hmm. But I think in the horse world, especially, there's this mythology that says as soon as you get one good step, the horse will keep it, or you have to keep it, or you have to make the horse keep it,
And that's
or
that right and wrong. Oh, I've
or
got it right. I'm done.
or the idea that better use of the body is always going to feel better. Like we're going to go
Mm.
happily into rainbows and lollipops as we improve. And I go, oh no, there's going to be a big, there's going to be a lot of resistance before you get to rainbows and lollipops.
And the realization, like you said, that you're not going to stay in the rainbows and lollipops. It's always going to be
A back and forth.
a back and forth. It's
Yeah.
always going to be instinctual habits, new
Yes.
awakenings, and back and forth and back and forth.
Yes.
Oh, the fun of it all.
Good. I think we can wrap it up there.
Hmm.
Anything to add?
Oh,
No. All right, you guys, thanks once again for joining us for the Horse Geeks podcast. Please like and share and subscribe. We really appreciate it. And if you've lasted this long, you're a diehard.
thanks for being with us.
Thanks for being with us. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.